So 1-2-Switch came out March 3rd, 2017, and we're here in 2023 asking, is this game actually worth it, or is this something you can totally skip now that we have so many other games available for the Nintendo Switch? But I'm not alone in asking this question. I have AJ of Redirect fame here with me. So, AJ, how do you feel about this game, and what do you remember about like your first experience with it?
I think the game is fine for what it is, right? Like, it, I think that for me, there's a lot of pushback on like the way that people look at this game because they like frame it up against what it came out next to, which is really just Breath of the Wild.
Right.
And that was like never what the game was supposed to be.
Right.
So my expectation going into it, and I played it like before launch. Like you remember the January Nintendo Switch presentation event. I actually went with that. I mean, I went to that because of Bob from the Wolf Den. He hit me up and was like, yo, you want to go to this thing? And I was like, yeah, I want to go to this thing. And he was like, all right, here's the thing. Fill this out. And then come to New York. And I was like, okay, sick, bet.
That's crazy.
So we went there, played that. And, goofy fun. There's like games that are more fun than others. Depends on who you play it with. I think mostly on which game is the most fun. The closest thing to me is like a Jackbox or like a WarioWare game. And I just look at it like that. Okay. Really.
Josie from the future here cutting in real quick, just in case you don't know, which I'm sure most of you do, but in case you need a little bit of a refresher, 1-2-Switch is a game that is essentially a collection of mini games, and they're all motion-based, but the trick here is that half of them are motion-based, and the other half, you don't want to look at the screen, you want to make eye contact with the other player. So it's a multiplayer-focused minigame collection, but it oftentimes feels very shovelware-esque, and you'll hear us talk about that later in this discussion, but it feels a little bit like shovelware occasionally, and there was just a lot of pushback initially because of that price tag of $50. Do you guys think $50 is worth it for 1-2-Switch, or do you think they realized that mistake with Everybody's 1-2-Switch, the sequel that was released this year for the game that includes smartphone integration, because they priced that game at $30? So maybe even Nintendo themselves was like, actually, I think it could sell a lot better and have a better public reception if it was cheaper. That's my opinion, and we talk about it later in this discussion as well, but I just wanted to come on here and give you a little bit of a refresher of what exactly 1-2-Switch is. It's just a minigame focused multiplayer game where there's a main focus on just doing some goofy stuff, You're milking the cow, that's so goofy, haha. It's kind of bizarre, but if that's the kind of deal you like, hey, maybe this is for you. If it's not, totally understandable. This game is not for a lot of people, but you'll see pretty much two different perspectives in this discussion, so I'm excited to know what you guys think. Let me know how you feel about 1-2-Switch in the comments down below. A lot of the discourse around it has, like, I feel like it's gone down. Like, it's just gotten more and more negative over time. Because when it first came out, people, like, didn't hate it too much. Because I think a lot of people saw it sort of as, like, the Switch's version of Wii Sports. It's like, it's the pack-in thing. But I think the biggest issue is that it wasn't a pack-in game.
Yeah.
So.
Which.
Yeah.
I think that's a whole other part of it that's, like, weird. It's like a weird gamer thing. The way gamers look at value is very skewed.
Okay.
And like how pack-ins are looked at in general is kind of weird too, right? Pack-ins don't exist because they have to. They exist because the company thought that without it, their console didn't have enough value.
Yeah.
But the Switch had enough value. It sold, it was selling all that they can make them. All that they can make just because of Breath of the Wild. Switch was, 1-2-Switch was just,
yeah, like
if this is the type of game that you would like instead, get this. Or if you want to play something that's not Breath of the Wild when you're done with Breath of the Wild, here's another option.
That's true.
My
idea
instead
was
of
that
like,
I feel like it has like this would have just aged a lot better if it was a pack-in game though, for like the first couple years, because basically it is a big tech demo for the Switch in some ways. It's the 100%. Only game that really shows off the HD rumble, and it just feels like it's very well. First of all, the price tag of it too, $50 for what's offered here. I just don't know if that's super worth it for a lot of people.
I mean, I would agree as far as like it not being worth it, because at the end of the day, like value in that sense is like personal.
Right.
It's how much would I pay for something like that? But it's not like they can't justify it. On one end, they could justify it because it's like it's a new game on a console that everybody wants, and it doesn't currently have a whole lot of games. So that's one end of it. On top of that, it's like it's basically a compilation of board games. Monopoly alone is $20, you know. So and this game has like what 20 games in it.
Yeah.
So not to say all of them individually have the same amount of like life in them that Monopoly alone would have, but depending on the person, it could.
Yeah. And then also, I guess the Switch's sort of reputation could, you know, it's like you associate 1-2 Switch with the Switch instead of Breath of the Wild with the Switch, right? So that could have a little bit harmed its hardcore appeal, at least, too.
That's the thing that's funny to me, though, right? Because another way that this game is framed in my mind is through my personal experience, which is when I got the Switch. I have a niece that is now 12. She was, what, 5 when the Switch came out. The Switch was like something that she thought was cool, but she didn't really understand it. She didn't care about any other game but 1-2 Switch. She would literally call the Nintendo Switch the 1-2 Switch. She's like, Uncle AJ, can we play the 1-2 Switch? Like, to me, like a game that can do that to somebody in her age group is valuable. You know, she doesn't care about Breath of the Wild, but she cared a whole lot about 1-2 Switch.
That's true. Yeah, I guess it sort of has that mass appeal, like something like Wii Sports does, where it's you pick it up and you can sort of understand it.
Right.
But at least when I played it, so the first time I played it was like a couple of years ago. I'd never played it at launch because I just wasn't interested. It wasn't a game for me, and it was always $50, and I was like, that's just not worth it for me. I don't see the value there. But one of my friends has it, and we played it a night that we were all hanging out in high school. And so if you can imagine a bunch of 18-year-olds playing 1-2 Switch, it was pretty chaotic. But like we were... It just feels a little bit slow too, like the game itself, with how intensive and long the tutorials are and weird they are. None of us got it, and it just felt just like a little bit like not quite as simple as Switch or Wii Sports.
Wii Sports, yeah.
So then it was like more complicated to really understand and dive into.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
because I feel like 1-2 Switch, a lot of the games, they're kind of like you watch them and like not even looking at the screen. Like you don't really need to know what is happening on the screen to understand like, oh, this is what this game is.
Right.
Like the ball count and like baseball and all that stuff. It's like most of that is like informed by everything but looking at it.
Right.
So stuff like shaking the controller and being like, it feels like there's like 9 balls in here.
Right.
Right. Or milking the cow. Like the controls are pretty simple. It's like 2 buttons.
I guess the controls...
and maybe it's like it's like gamers' propensity to look at it like any other game, and it's like, okay, there has to be something more here, or like am I missing something because it looks very simple? It can't be that simple, right? You know, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, maybe it was also like the situation, I guess, could have not been super, because it's a lot of audio cues, right? And you're like trying to you know, you hear the sound effect and then you swing or whatever. And so that might have had a little bit of a cause to it. And every single time we were always trying to look at the screen, I remember, and we'd all have to yell at each other and be like, don't look at the screen. It's going to screw everything up. Like, you have to look at each other. But yeah, I thought that was I don't know, it was an interesting first encounter with the game, at least.
Yeah.
So what do you think the best thing and the worst thing about this game is?
I think the best thing is, like I was saying before about like the Jackbox games, is very much so informed by the type of people that you're playing them with. Because like in a vacuum, something like Quiplash is stupid and it's not fun. But if you're playing it with people that are funny and or interesting, or that you gel with, or you have the same type of like sense of humor as, it's a lot of fun.
Right.
That it's the same thing here, right? Where if we're playing with people that are like down and like not like approaching it cynically, or even like they're just the type of person that would have fun with something like that. Because like obviously there's like the gamers that's like, I'm not trying to move when I play a game. Right. I just want to like sit down, have my controller in my hand. I'm not trying to, you know, Wii Sports waggle, get motion controls out of my face, right?
Yeah.
But there's other people that just don't have those like preconceived like versions.
Right.
They're just like, oh, this is what video games look like when people on commercials are playing video games.
Yeah.
So like, sure, I'll try that. And then they do it and they just have a lot of fun with it. It's something that like people that will let themselves unironically have fun with something like this can be more fun than like what a lot of times in like gamer culture. And I enjoy these games too. Obviously, my favorite game on Switch is Smash Brothers, and that gets super toxic.
Yeah.
But it's a nice break in that.
That's true.
Not always having to like approach a game in that kind of way, in that kind of headspace.
Yeah, not quite so hardcore. It's just like pretty casual. Yeah. Yeah, I guess the thing I liked about it sort of when we played it was just that it was funny because we were with a good group of people, that it was like when we failed, it was kind of funny, or when we did something miraculously kind of good, it was like just sort of a fun little moment, but nothing about it really stuck out to us. Like, it's not something where we're like, oh, guys, remember 1-2 Switch, let's go back, let's play this game. Right. And if nothing else, they play it because I didn't like it, and that was probably the only game I've done terribly at, you know, because I'm a little bit more into it than most of my friends, and so it's the only one that really keeps us level, I guess. But it was, yeah, so I don't know, we'll see.
I do think that it's like a better thing. It's kind of like VR in my head, where like you don't, depending on like the general audience, because again, if you have somebody like where my niece was in her like gamer journey, right? Like that's all she ever wanted to play. So I played it probably more than most people that didn't have kids in their lives.
Yeah.
But even removed from that, it's a nice, quick, easy way to be like, look at how cool the Joy-Con are.
Sure.
No other game, like you were saying, showcases HD Rumble and other features in it, like the IR sensor and stuff like that. Games literally have not used like at all, let alone like as much to like the extent of 1-2 Switch. So like it's a cool, like fast, like let's get to know what the Joy-Con do kind of game, right? It's something that's more cool for like people that are outside of this realm than it is for people that are in it, you know? Because like if you're playing with people that also have a Switch, like it's not going to impress them as much, you know?
Yeah.
But for people that aren't like super gamer heavy, I think that it's more for them than it is for us.
And at least in that first year of Switch, it was probably pretty cool, because I remember like a lot of the videos at that time were like, this game's kind of dumb, but it's actually really cool because I can feel all the like marbles moving around in the Joy-Con, or I can, it's like reading my motion through the IR camera, which is cool. Right. And so I think that's really...
Like, how does it know I'm opening and closing my mouth?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. The way that you have to play some of those games, though, is so, like, it seems like it's like, you know, trying to be goofy for the sake of goofy sometimes, and I think it gets in the way of the gameplay occasionally. And there was one, maybe it was that sandwich one. There's one with the IR camera with my friends that they were like not having it, but yeah. So we kind of touched on this earlier, but the $50 price tag, do you think that hurt the game, or do you think like, you know, it's just the game itself, you know, the reputation of it, like regardless of price?
I don't think it hurt the game. I think looking at how much that game sold, they sold way more than you would think. Like with the discourse around that game, you would think that game flopped.
Right.
But they got $50 per person for almost 4 million people.
Right.
You know, like that's more than some franchises in totality have sold in their lifetime, let alone on Switch.
Right.
Like that's I think the last time that I checked, because I made a video about 1-2 Switch specifically. I think that's like more than Xenoblade Chronicles has sold on Switch. I mean, the franchise. 1 through 3. That's crazy.
That's insane. Yeah, I think it just kind of, regardless of the price tag, it was not the game that a lot of people wanted, I guess. But it also, like, hardcore gamers. Because then there's, like, you know, a bunch of casuals do have this game. My friend bought a Switch for the first time, bought 1-2 Switch with it, and bought Mario Party just to play with everybody. And she was happy with that. And so, like, it's definitely captured that more casual market. But then I guess the next question I have for this is, do you think it warrants the sequel that it got this year, Everybody's 1-2 Switch? And I don't know, have you played that game?
No, I wanted to play it because I saw that people were playing it like online, which it like doesn't really support that. And I was like, how? So I do want to eventually like experiment with that and like at least like play it a few times on stream. But I haven't done it yet because just other stuff's coming out and Smash Brothers.
Would you think though of all of the like Nintendo games, like why would they give everybody or 1-2 Switch a sequel? That's what like was just puzzling to me. I was like,
I think Nintendo makes decisions outside of factors like, oh, this is like a massive franchise and we can make more money out of it.
That's
and
true.
More so like some random dev at EPD was like, yo, you know, it would be a funny idea, this. And then somebody else said, yo, this would be a funny idea too. And they're like, oh, we have a franchise for that. 1-2 Switch. Let's make another one, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
And it could even be like the more like cynical read of like this the last game sold almost 4 million copies. We would be crazy to not make a sequel to that.
That's true. That's true.
Which is also a part of it.
Yeah, the sequel was actually, I like it more than 1-2 Switch. I still don't think it's great, but it's interesting because it has a lot of smartphone integration, which sounds kind of dumb, but when you're with a group of people, it's not like you're gonna need 4 different Joy-Cons. You can just have the 2 Joy-Cons, and then everyone can have their phone, which is kind of cool. And they
again Jackbox.
Yeah, it is. That one is much more similar to Jackbox than the last one too.
Right.
But so like as a party game, do you think you can see yourself playing this like with people like again in the future or like
yeah
I
think I just have like a lot of different groups of friends. Like I have some friends that like don't play games at all. I have some friends that play games, but they just play like 2K and Madden.
Yeah.
I have some friends that do play like everything like I do. So like if I'm with a group of friends, like if like my mom and my family comes over here, I would way sooner suggest that we play this game than pretty much any other game.
Yeah, like
because even something Kart? Like because even something like Mario Kart requires some level of like understanding of how games work, and there's a lot less of like an equalizing factor of like if I'm playing Mario Kart with a bunch of people that not let alone don't play Mario Kart but don't play games, I'm just going to win all the time,
right?
And that's not fun for them. But something like 1-2 Switch is like, well, you don't have to be a great gamer to be able to win in that or have fun, you know. So I think that it does have its place in that sense, but it also just depends on if people also have the same group of people that they surround themselves with. You know? For me, I asked, like I saw in the doc, like you're basically talking about how like would you pick this game over something like Mario Kart, right? And that thought enters my head all the time when I see them announce like a 2D platformer that's not online multiplayer. Because like when I'm like hanging out with friends that are gamers and they want to play video games, I'm never going to like pull out Kirby Star Allies. It's not going to happen.
Right.
But we're going to play again either Smash or Mario Kart. And that's just like every game has to go through that gate, right?
Yeah.
And I think that most of the games that gamers are like more likely to embrace in that way, even if they don't make that choice to pick that game over, you know, picking Rayman Legends over Mario Kart or whatever, gamers still love Rayman Legends, right? So like, but for me, it's like Rayman Legends is more similar to those games that are like steeper competition. So there's more of a reason to look at it as direct competition of like, I'm in the mood for a gamer game. Yeah. But if I'm not in the mood for a gamer game, I'm not even looking at those two, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's a blue ocean thing, you know?
Okay. Interesting. I feel like all of the people in my life, more or less, at least like right now, at least somewhat understand video games. Like they don't necessarily like own it or they're really good at it, but they like get it enough to play Mario Kart or something like that. And recently I played Nintendo Switch Sports with a couple people, and that was much more fun than I had with just 1-2 Switch because those are even more intuitive where it's like if you understand sports, which is like a lot of my friends are very into that. So understanding that, then Switch Sports is pretty nice to go to, I guess, directly from that.
Yeah, you know how to swing a tennis racket.
Yeah, and it's not quite so much of like, okay, we're playing this really obscure game, or in the case of everybody's 1-2 Switch, it's like, oh, I'm throwing these ninja stars like off my phone. It's like, I don't know. It's not I guess something that's lasted long in our friend group. And then, like, how would you say Nintendo should improve this game, if at all? Like, what would you do to make this one different?
I think the magic bullet for them that everybody would like, they literally wouldn't have to change anything. And the perception of like the core gamer audience would change drastically if they just had Wario on the cover and it was called Wario 2 Switch or whatever the fuck. Am I allowed to curse on this?
Yeah,
I should actually have before.
That's okay.
Okay. But that's what they should have. That's what they should have did. If it was a WarioWare game, everybody would have loved this game. It would have sold 8 million copies.
Damn.
But because it was like this new, and that's an exaggeration. WarioWare games don't really sell that much. But like nobody looks at a new WarioWare game getting announced and they're like, "This is a ripoff. I can't believe you're selling this for $40." You know, like it might be liable to be 60. You
that's
know?
True.
But it's because it has that cultural cachet of Wario. 1-2 Switch is just this random, like, you know, like it almost like it's giving like shovelware.
Yeah, a little bit.
Before you play it. And I think like playing it is like the experience of it is not that different from like WarioWare Smooth Moves or something like that. It just doesn't have Wario on the screen yelling at you with all his friends. So.
Right. I think, you know, you're definitely onto something there. I feel like the perception of it could have just been because of the look of it and just how people... It looks really goofy. I mean, the trailers of it, it's like they're shooting... you know, guns at each other, like the quick draw thing, which is actually kind of a cool game, but they just like portray it in such a sort of awkward way with these live action actors, and that decision for the live action cast is just so weird to me.
It just seems like a Wii U era game.
Yeah.
Where they're like the thing about Wii that made it succeed is that they made Wii look like in the early days look unironically cool. Like the ads were like they had the college age kids. Right. Whereas with Wii U, they're like, oh, okay, well, we know ultimately we're going to end up selling this mostly to kids. Hopefully, let's put the kids in the ads. Even kids don't want to play games that kids look like they want to play. They want to play the games that their brothers want to play, their dad, you know? So like, I think that's a mistake that they made there too, where they kind of, I don't even necessarily want to call it a mistake because I think that, they could kind of skip the line with 1-2 Switch in the sense that like they already with Breath of the Wild, they sold it to your dad and your uncle and your brother and all that, like the like early 20s to like mid 30s crowd that younger kids are looking at. It's like, man, this game really, you know, they love this a lot. I'll probably like it too. They already sold it with that. So 1-2 Switch could talk directly to them and be like, hey, you know, goofy stuff that you like watching on Cartoon Network or on YouTube now. You could do it right now in the video game on your 1-2 Switch. Yeah. And there it is.
Yeah.
Also, it's just like, it's something that you don't have to explain. And I think that was also what it was with my niece specifically, right? Where like the concept of drifting as a 5-year-old, I'm like, you got to drift here because like that's why you keep dying, because you're not drifting and you're just driving straight and, you know, like whatever, that sort of stuff. There's so many buttons involved in just drifting. Yeah. But in milking the cow, you just press 2 buttons, or in the dial turning game, you just turn the Joy-Con, or the ball counting game, you just shake it and you're like, oh, guys, you know, like there's like not a whole lot of information that you need to know that's game specific. It's just life. It's like, all right, well, if I want to get an idea of what's inside this Christmas gift, I can move it a little bit, but it feels kind of heavy. It feels like this is in there. That's the 1-2 Switch games. It's like just stuff that you do, or like you're pantomiming real life. Right. So it's easier for people that aren't like engrossed in games to be able to get a grasp on it.
Yeah. So you think,
at least to me,
you think that's like the main audience of this game, right? Would just be like mostly kids and stuff and.
Yeah, parents. At least now. Like in the early days, I think that the audience was broader because it was this like early look into like what the Joy-Con could be. Right. And
on top of like one of the first Switch games and all that.
Right. Yeah, that too. But I think that's another thing that's like weird about gamers when they talk about the Switch launch window. And I know you're going to talk about this because that's what this is. But like ARMS is another example to me that people talk about and they have like a weird opinion on, where they're like, oh, nobody wanted to play that game, but it sold like 3 million copies. Yeah.
And for a new IP, that's insane.
A new IP, right? And a fighting game. Fighting games do not sell like that. That's unless you're Street Fighter, Smash Brothers, Tekken, or Mortal Kombat, you are selling under 1 million copies. It's not going to happen for you. But people are like, oh, well, it was an early Switch game. You know how many launch titles, like in that window, did not sell 1 million, let alone 2-3 million copies?
Yeah.
1-2 Switch is in the same boat where it's like, we can try to give it the excuse of like, oh, well, it was a launch game. It's like, yeah, but a lot of launch games didn't do that. And they were cheaper. You know, there were $10, $20 games that didn't like have that level of commercial success.
Yeah. But do you think maybe it's because it was like a Nintendo game and it was like they had basically 2 big Nintendo games at the launch, right? They had this and then they had Breath of the Wild. And so if you didn't want that hardcore experience, this is kind of the only other option.
That was like off the top of my head, I can't remember what the expanded launch was, but that was like at the preview of it, and then they started filling it in with other stuff. Like Snipper Clips was another one of their games, you know. So like I think there were more games for people to be able to like play if they didn't want to play Breath of the Wild, and like that was just literally for that 1 month. And then every month there was like more and more games. So like I find it hard to believe that most average people were like scouring the world for more games to play. Like they finished Breath of the Wild in under a month and they're like, I need something else to play. You know, like most people were still playing Breath of the Wild for far longer than a month. And it was like the only thing that they were playing, period, let alone like on this console. Yeah. Right. And there's people that like me, and I'm sure like you, that like, even if we're not playing everything else, we want to have those options ready to go when we're done.
Right.
So like usually me, like post being old enough to purchase my own video games, and especially since like the way that I buy games is talking about games, I just buy all the launch games.
Yeah.
That just happens. So like that's going to happen. But I think that for most people, it's just like, you're just going to like, even if you only buy one game, even if it's N64 and literally it's just Mario 64 and that is it, like you're going to be satisfied with Mario 64 because it was that good, right? You know? And I think that's what Breath of the Wild is. And I think 1-2 Switch is like a decent enough like supplementary break from that, if that's what you want.
Okay, I see. Yeah, the perception of this game has been very far skewed, I think, and it's a lot of people who also haven't played it and who have just like heard how like quote bad it is, but they never actually experienced that for themselves. They've just heard that it's not the game for gamers, which it's never trying to be.
Yeah, that's the wildest thing about it for me. Like for the most part, especially like people that are within the audience, nobody that I've seen buy 1-2 Switch has complained about 1-2 Switch. It's only the people that have never played it that are like, this game sucks. I can't believe they made this. And I'm like, yo, the game's like pretty fun. It's not the best game in the world, but like, I don't regret my purchase. I would buy it again.
Yeah.
But like, again, like, yeah, it's not Breath of the Wild for sure. Like, if gun to my head, that's what the question is. If it's between spending $60 on Breath of the Wild and $40 on 1-2 Switch, what are you going to do? Like, yes, I'm buying Breath of the Wild. I'll spend $100 on Breath of the Wild.
Right.
But like, 1-2 Switch isn't bad because Breath of the Wild is phenomenal. You know?
Yeah, right. At this point, I feel like in 2023, I struggle to see a reason, I guess, why people would want to get this, because now everyone sort of knows at least like what the Switch is capable of. They've seen it pushed to its limits. And then if you want this kind of goofy motion controlled game, you have that with something like Switch Sports, or even the up and coming WarioWare game like you were talking about. I think it's called Move It. That's probably going to be the exact same thing.
Right. I will say like, as far as like Nintendo Switch Sports, at least for me personally, and granted, a lot of this is informed by the fact that like I got this game expecting to be able to like want to play it with like friends online and like other creators.
Right.
Like when it first came out, me, Bob, and Wood from Beat 'em Ups. For people that however wouldn't know that.
Knows who that guy is.
But we wanted to play the game, but there's only been so many games that you can like play in certain combinations where it's like, oh, you have 3 people, so you can't play this game or this game or this game. If you want to play with 4 people, you got to play bowling or tennis, and that's it. You know, like that sort of stuff. So like I think my perception for that game is kind of skewed in a similar way that your perception is like with 1-2 Switch, but just in the like the reverse roles, where there's like a specific like experience that I wanted out of that it didn't give me. And the expectation that I had for 1-2 Switch was aligned with what it ended up being.
Right. I guess you wouldn't go into 1-2 Switch expecting it to be this huge thing, but something like Switch Sports, you'd be like, okay, this is at least going to be as iconic as Wii Sports, plus it'll have all these modernizations, which it didn't have. I think the only reason I really liked Switch Sports was because I grew up playing volleyball forever. I, went to college to play volleyball, and most of my friend group are other volleyball players, and so they put volleyball in the game. And we were like, this is amazing, because
it was mad advanced volleyball.
And it was like, it's probably like the best iteration of volleyball in a video game, because it always sucks. Like, we had been complaining that it's just hard to do. It sucks. It's not how it actually is. But 1-2 Switch is actually pretty true to the real sport, or not 1-2 Switch.
You mean Nintendo Switch?
Yeah. Nintendo Switch Sports is actually pretty true to the sport. So we were just like, we absolutely loved it. But yeah, the fact that you can't play online and stuff really hindered it. Do you think something like that could have given new life to something like 1-2 Switch? So if you could play it online with friends?
Maybe, yeah. Like there's a lot of stuff that there's a lot of dumb stuff that I'll play with my friends. We're just like, this game looks terrible, but it would be hilarious to play together. Let's get it, Yeah. So like, I for sure. Like, I think every game has like the capability to do that in both directions. Yeah. Where like if a game's just online, like you're killing the potential there too. I mean, just off. Yeah. Well, either if it's just online or just offline, it is hindering how well received it could potentially be by either one of those like audiences.
Right. And that would have been cool, especially at launch too, like if you could have that game to play with friends all over, but obviously that's not what 1-2 Switch is, but yeah, that's I guess the only thing I would do to like fix the game or whatever is I would probably get rid of the live action goofiness and just like put in some cool little animated tutorials.
Make it WarioWare.
Make it WarioWare. Make it WarioWare and put it online. I think that's probably what it is. And then I wish it would get sort of a permanent price cut, because I feel like for a lot of people it's not worth it for $50, but for some families it could be worth it for like $20. And
I think $20 is, I mean, that would be good, but I think $20 is kind of like underselling it.
Really?
Personally. Yeah. Just because like Monopoly's $20.
That's true.
That's one board game. And again, like the way I think about value is a lot different from I think most gamers in general, because like the way I look at it is like I spent more than $20 on lunch yesterday. So like, like it's just like that. And not even in a thing of like, I just have so much money, but just like, no, like the value of money and like how much things cost is like so exaggerated for games. Like gamers are like, I want 100 hours of entertainment for $60.
Right.
But you go to the movies for $60 and you're there for 2, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
You just bring one other person with you and you're in there for $60 at least, like that stuff can get expensive, concerts, whatever. So like I think a game that can like afford you 100 hours of entertainment costing like anywhere between, $30 to $60, or even now $70, depending on the game.
Yeah.
Can be worth it,
Yeah.
I don't think that like 1-2 Switch is like a premium game or anything like that. I don't think that it's worth $60. I don't necessarily think it's like absolutely worth $50. But for me, it's just like the price is more of a suggestion than a demand. And people look at prices in the gaming community like demands. It's like, this is a $50 game, and if you don't like it, yell at us about it. And it's really just like, here's a game that we think is worth $50, yes or no, and then either you say, yeah, I'll pay $50 for that, or you say, absolutely not, I'm not paying $50 for that, and then that's just what it is. It's just like 1-2 Switch to me, I think the weirdest thing about it is like people don't just not like it. People don't like it, and then they're trying to like bargain for the game to be given to them. Yeah. Like if I don't like something, I don't care if you pay me to experience the thing. I don't want it. Yeah. But people are like, hey, but what if it's a packing game? What if it's $10? What if you like if it doesn't look like a game that's going to be fun to you, like why does the price even matter?
Yeah, that's true. I guess the other argument against that though could be something like everybody's 1-2 Switch came out for $30. So maybe even Nintendo realized, hey, we could have at least sold more if it and people wouldn't complain quite so much about this game if it was a little bit more reasonably priced.
I agree. But I also think that that's like it's a coin flip, right? Because people say that whenever any Nintendo game is announced at this point, it's always a price debate.
Yeah, well,
you got to look at the numbers. It's like, do we think that if 1-2 Switch, the original, was priced at $30 or $25, let's say, would it sell double?
Yeah, I guess probably not.
Could you see 1-2 Switch selling 8 million copies if it was $25? I don't think so. Like they might have sold like an additional million, but they still would have made less money at that point.
That's true.
So
that's true. In the economic sense, it doesn't make a lot of sense, I guess, because then it's just. That's true.
It's kind of like what they did with the Wii U. Like the Wii U at the end of its life, they're like, this failed. We're doing nothing for a year. Like we're literally not releasing anything for a year because we gotta get our ducks in a row for Nintendo Switch. And it's still the same price it was at launch.
Right.
Because it's worth more to them to be able to get every dollar that they can out of the couple hundred sales that they may or may not get within that year, or 1,000 sales, probably more realistically. Than it is for them to cut the price in half and make less money per avid fan that's like, oh shoot, this Nintendo system's going to be discontinued, I gotta get it. Know. I mean, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, personally. I guess so. Like if it was $25 at launch, though, I feel like it could have done pretty well, just because then you get it with Breath of the Wild. It'd honestly be almost an automatic purchase. It's like, oh, both Nintendo games. One of them's this big, huge expansion, and then that $25 price tag sets it up to not be something super special, but maybe just be something a little bit fun. And I guess you're right, though. It wouldn't, like, in the end of the day, they'd make less money. So, yeah.
Yeah. And, that's a whole other thing, right?
Right. Because business side.
To me, it's just like that's the because that's how people frame it. And that's what, like, a lot of times, I don't know if you ever see me like rant on Twitter. People just argue about things wrong. Like, I don't even necessarily disagree with the things that they're saying, but if you're like, man, this would print money if you do X, and it's like, okay, well, let's approach that. Let's dissect that. Would it? What would happen if this, right? If we make it about money, then if the argument doesn't hold water about money, then we got to approach it a different way. People will love this game more. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a stronger argument. If I would feel better about my purchase if it was like in line with the price point that is in my head. For sure. But like it would make more money, probably not.
Yeah, no, I guess economically it wouldn't make a ton of sense. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everything that I have for 1-2 Switch. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Don't buy 1-2 Switch in 2023. Because it's not 2017 and the game's different now in terms of its value. But like, it's not terrible. It's decent.
Yeah. If you're looking for an experience like that, I'd say Switch Sports or Jackbox, something like that. But probably not.
Yeah, that's $20.
Yeah, exactly. See, you know what? I think it would be better remembered if it was like $20 like a Jackbox game. But yeah, do you want to plug yourself? You want to say where everybody can find you?
I'm everywhere on Watch Redirect. Go to youtube.com, twitch.tv, all that stuff. Watch Redirect. That's what it is.
Perfect.
Thanks for having me.
He'll be linked down below. Thank you so much for coming on. This was very fun. I appreciate it. I guess the question now comes, what do you think about 1-2 Switch? Is it worth it to you or is it not? Do you have a hot Nintendo Switch take or a cold one? I want to know them all in the comments down below, and I'll see you in this video. It's a banger. It's a vibe. Check out AJ's place and subscribe. Get me off this rhyming train.